So in today's session, we're going to implement this design in our app or our Flutter app. So to get started, yesterday we would have already discussed about Flutter create and making the basic app. So I'm just going to do that once again. Uh, all right. So the first thing that we need to do is to analyze like how exactly do we implement this page. So I guess we'll go with the page in the right side first, and then implement this part. Like once we click on this card, it'll redirect to this page. So like it was told yesterday that in Flutter, each element or each box is basically a widget, and it's made up of multiple widgets. So as you can see, this design is basically laid out into different rows. This is a row and this is a row and so on. So and this is basically a navigator, as in each button you click, it'll navigate to a new page. So let's do one thing. On the outer side, we'll try implementing the navigator page so that each button links to an empty page first, and then we'll work on each pages. So I'm just going to open the project that I just created. Okay, so I'm just going to open the project that we just created. So just to explain in detail, like regarding these files, these are basically native files. Basically, whatever code that you write in Dart will be converted into, for example, if you're building the app in Android, it will be converted into a Java uh, platform, and then that's how you can use it in your Android device. Same way goes for iOS. And since Flutter is cross-platform, you can use it on, you can have the same code base for all your devices. So yeah, I'm just gonna go and Flutter by default has their documentation in their website, wherein for each of their widgets, they have an implementation and all sorts of stuff about that particular widget. So we can just be like, for example, if it's a button or if it's a card or if it's a navigation screen like this, you can just visit the official documentation website, api.flutter.dev, and access all of it. So I'm just going to explain this code. So there are basically two types of widgets in, like, the app in itself, like the screen in itself in Flutter is a widget. So this entire screen is a big widget, and it comprises of smaller widgets inside it. So the parent widget in every Flutter app is mostly a material app. Like most of the apps you build nowadays are based on material elements. Like right now, there was Material U for Android 12, but we'll be using the older Material app just to learn that side of it. So inside Material app, we can have there are multiple components like title, theme, and home and everything. So when you open the recent screen of your app, you can see your app's name in the list. So if you want to change that, you just have to modify this. Let's just call this travel app, and you'll be able to modify it. So there are two types of of parent widgets in Flutter. One is a stateless widget and another is a stateful widget. A stateless widget is basically a widget which is constant. Like, you can't really modify the screen much. So say, for example, this text. This text alone can be a part of a stateless widget. But the screen as a whole, since we have buttons here which redirects to new screen, it's a dynamic widget. The screen changes depending upon the action that the user gives. So for those kind of things, we'll need a stateful widget. So remove these comments. There, this is yeah. So we have our emulator ready. I'm just gonna run the app. So yeah. So first we're gonna implement the same bottom navigation bar, wherein if you navigate on each item, it'll redirect to a new screen. So scaffold is something that is a standard widget in every app. Scaffold basically gives you the body or the template for you to add your text or your buttons and everything. So as you can see in the material app, we've redirected the home to my homepage, which is another widget. You can directly add your scaffold widget here also, but just to optimize your code or you know for better coding practices, it's always better to split your widgets into different classes. So that's why initially we are calling it in my homepage. For now I'm just going to remove this part because so yeah, in scaffold there are multiple elements inside scaffold like app bar, body, floating action button. So our scaffold is our entire widget, and our body is basically this top part of it, which is what majority of the app occupies. And the rest of it, which is floating action button, is basically just a button that floats here in the corner. We can specify it. If I need a floating action button in my screen, I can just add this here and we can enter it. But right now what we need is a bottom navigation bar. So like the tutorial says above, I'm going to add a bottom navigation bar. So if you see the widgets in particular, there's this widget called bottom navigation bar, wherein you define each item here. So I'm just gonna take the entire same thing from the documentation, which is bottom navigation bar, and items define how many, what do you say, buttons you need to have in the bottom navigation bar. So by default, our app looks like this. All right. Um, Now what I need to do is I need to remove this floating action button because that's not needed in our app. Uh, we don't need this in our app. So if I just press Control S, it automatically reloads the screen, or you can go for hot reload also, which basically, like if you've made some change in the app, if you hit hot reload, it automatically refreshes the app. So in scaffold, there's this thing called app bar. This top portion that you can see is called the app bar. And by default, we get this tag called debug. That is just to make sure that once you've completely made the app, you can remove the debug tag. Or else, like if you ask me what's the use case, by mistake, if you publish your app to the Play Store and it's just a debug version, you can immediately rectify it and uh, yeah, and publish it again. So for now, if you want to remove that, you can just add this debug show check mode banner and set it to false. If you do that, the debug tag gets removed. And like if you guys want to code with me as I'm coding, you may very well do that too. Okay, so now our first step is to add a bottom navigation bar. So inside our scaffold, I'm going to add something called bottom navigation bar, right? Bottom navigation bar. And like the documentation says, items, we can define how many items are there. So I'm just going to copy the exact same thing from here. Okay. So here we have a here, this is the syntax for the bottom navigation bar, and we can define each item here. That is what the items tag is for. The current index means, like, by default, if we are in the first page, it is index 0. If I click the second page, it's index 1 and index 2. So by default, what is the index is what they're asking. So I'm just going to create an int value called selected index, and I'm going to set it to 0. All right, so what this does is, by default, my index is set to 0. Now on tapping the item, all right, which means when you click each button, what happens is what you can define over here. So I can just add this like that. So val will basically contain the int value of the button, of the index of the button you click. Like if I click here, that val will return 0. If I click here, it will return 1, and here 2. So basically what I'm going to do is, over here, I'm going to add selected index equals val. So set state is something that you define when you want to refresh your app. Like if I just remove the set state and just add selected index equals val, then the screen doesn't refresh. Like it just sets the value, but you want this entire widget to rebuild, right? Because you want the index also to change. That's why we are adding set state here. So once I do that, as you can see, we have 3 buttons here. Now, like the design says, we don't need a label here. It's just an icon. So we can just remove the label tag in all of them. And yeah, there are some assets which are given. I'm not sure if those assets are shared with you, but I can also put it in the chat right now. Yeah, I think it was shared with everyone in the chat yesterday, but I'm just going to share it. Yeah, so that assets zip file will basically have all the pictures that is necessary. So what I'm going to do is, in my project, in the base of my project, like I need to be able to access all these images in my app, right? So I'm going to create a folder called assets inside my project folder. All right. And in this, I'm going to add all the images. Basically all of these, I'm going to copy inside the assets folder. All right. Now, if I need to access any of these assets, okay, let me explain about this file called pubspec.yml. Okay, this is a file that you'll see in the root of the project. This is where you can add plugins. Basically, for example, if you need to add something like a Google sign-in or some external plugin into your app, this is where you add it. All right. There's this repository called pub.dev. Okay, this is an official repository by Flutter themselves. So like for example, if I need to add sign in with Google, I can just search for it and there'll be a package for it, and there'll be a clear documentation on how exactly do you implement it in your app. So I can just add the plugin to pubspec.yml. Like for example, okay, let's take a real use case scenario. Okay, we've used a font called Roboto here. By default in Android or in Flutter for per se, Roboto is the font that you need. So here we've used Roboto everywhere, but if in case uh, you need a font, an external font like one of the Google fonts, then there's a package for that. You just have to go to pub.dev and search for Google Fonts. There. Go to installing here, and you just need to copy this dependency. And in dependency, you just have to paste it here. What that does is you'll be able to access all the Google fonts within your app. So for now, I'm not adding this because we don't need it. I just wanted to tell about the use case of pubspec.yml. Now to add an asset, yeah, so there's a commented code here called assets. You just have to uncomment it. So for now, we'll need we'll basically need all of the assets because we'll be using it. Uh, we have the search, the list. Okay, we have multiple options here. Okay, either we could use the assets that is given and add them here, or we can also do one more thing. We can basically change the icon here. Like our first icon is the search icon. By default, if you since material we're importing material here, you'll be able to access some basic icons which are available. So if I just type icons dot search, yeah, and hit Control S, it turns out we need to provide a label for each. So we can just set the label to probably an empty string here. It's not the best practice, but for now, to get the layout that we're looking for, we can do something like that. So like you can see, we have the search icon here. The second widget is a list icon. So, and the third is basically an avatar. Yeah, so that will do something similar to what we're looking for. All right. Now we need to, by default in our app, color the color is orange here, but we have given a different color here. You can just copy the same hex from here and change the color of the selected item. So color CUXFF and just add it here. So like you can see, the color here has changed. Now on clicking each button, we have the index of the current page stored inside selected index. Now when selected index changes, we need the index of the page also to change. So if you can see here, they've created like what we can do here is, instead of the body basically determines what comes here. All right. So we can add an if condition here instead of this whole center thing. Now if I remove the center, let's just make it a little more easier and just add a text called hi. Okay, we'll just get a simple text here. Now let's call this page 1 instead. Okay, so whatever I click by default will be in page 1 itself. There'll be no changes because I haven't added any code to change anything. Now I'm going to add a if condition saying if selected index is 0, then add page 1, else if selected index is 1, and add a text called page 2, else just add page 3. So what I've done here is I've added an if condition based on the value of selected index. Now when you tap on each button, the value of selected index changes, and similarly you want the page also to change. So when I click here, it changes to page 2. So basically I can change the entire page depending upon what you click. So for now, since in our design we have only page 1, I'm just going to ignore about page 2 and 3. I'm just going to leave page 2 and 3 right there. Instead of page 1, I'm going to add the code that you're looking for. So, okay, by default in many apps you may see this bar on top, but in our design we don't have the bar. So we can just remove this app bar on top. This part you can just remove. That will make the page, or okay, because an app bar is mostly given because it occupies this topmost part. It gets, if you enter some widget over here, it gets, the top bar gets overlapped by it. So let's just do one thing. Let's add an app bar without a title. Put the elevation as 0. Elevation determines how much. Okay, I'll show you. If elevation is 0 and if elevation is 10, there'll be a difference. As you can see, it looks a little more elevated from the screen. So I'm adding the elevation as 0 and background color as colors.white. So okay, and we also need to change the background color of the screen. For that, scaffold itself has a parameter called background color, and you can just change it to white. So now our page looks white, just like how this one looks. Now what we're gonna add is, there are multiple columns here. This is the first column, these icons are the second column, this is the third column, and this is the fourth column. So I'm going to add, instead of page 1, I'm going to add something called column. In that we can add children. So in column I can define multiple widgets, like say 1, 2. So what happens is you will get each, what do you say, widget you add in a column 1, 2, 3. So we need to replace this text 1, 2, 3 with this design that we're looking for. So the first thing I'm going to do is add this text. What would you like to find? Now, as you can see, between the design and here, there is a gap between the text and the border of it, but ours is very close. So what we're going to do is we'll add a small a widget called padding. Above the column, we need to add a widget called padding. If you just, in Figma, if you just click on Alt, you can check what is the gap that is maintained here. So it's approximately 16. So you can just add on. Okay. Now the font size here used is 728 and it's bold. So to modify the font size, you can just add a style here, text style. There. So now it looks a little similar. Now we need to add these icons, as you can see here. So to add them, let me just check the assets folder. Okay, we have the picture of the bed, the parachute, okay, air transport, we have everything. Okay, so we can't really change. Okay, instead of using these images, I think I'm going to use the default, what do you say, icons available on Flutter, because as you can see, when we click on this, the color of it changes to blue. So okay, maybe not. We could also add these assets. Let's do one thing. Let's add all these assets to our project. I can just show you how we can add an image, right? So images is inside assets and the name is air transport.png. The other one is called parachute. Then there's a bed.png and electric scooter. And just click on Control S, or you have to just go to the terminal and type flutter pub get. So this basically gets all these assets and links it with your app. So whenever you make some change in pubspec.yaml, you can't just hit hot reload. It's not going to work. You'll have to kill the app and restart it, because you're making a major change in the app. It could be a new plugin or it could be anything. So you need to kill the app and run it again to make it work. So where's our column now? Yeah, our column is here. So we need to replace the text 2 with these icons. All right. For that, I'm going to add a row. These are columns, these are rows. So we'll have 4 rows basically here. And this row, I'm going to add a container. Add an image. You can just call this widget called image.asset, and all the path for it. Um, the first one is an aeroplane, right? So air transport. Okay. Now we just need to define the width and height of it. So it's around 71 by 71. Okay, so we have something similar here. Now there's a small gap of around 24 between the text and this. We can just add that here and just add a sized box here. Just need to add 4 of these. First is air transport, second is the bed, third is parachute and electric scooter. So as you can see, I've added all the icons. There just needs to be like proper padding over here between each icon. So we can just add that here as main axis alignment, as that basically auto aligns your icons. Now we need to add the widgets below. We need to replace 3 with this text called top destinations. So where is 3? Okay. Okay. We need to align it to the left and add a padding below it. So I'm going to take the same 24 height. .24 as the font size and 700. Okay. Now I need to just align it to the left side. So in column, we have an option to align the cross axis also. So I can just cross axis alignment as start. So it will get aligned to the left side of it. Now we need to add these widgets. So this is basically, you could call it a list, but it is something that you should be able to scroll horizontally. So to create that, below top destinations, I'm going to add a small and I'm going to add this widget called list view. Here we can determine the scroll direction. By default, it's a list that you can scroll vertically, but here I'm just going to change the scroll direction to yeah. So scroll direction, you can just define it as horizontal, and then you can add the widgets you want. So now, okay, let's just analyze the first widget. It's basically an image that is overlapping a card. So anytime you have a widget overlapping another widget, stack is what you use. Okay, so let's just take the image of Venice first.
Sure.
I think I'll add all the rest of the assets too, so that we don't have to restart the app always. So now I've added all the assets. You can just press Control S to, fetch everything. Like I said before, you can also go to terminal and type flutter pub get. Now first, while the app runs, let's just write the code for it. Okay, so as you can see here, it's a card and there's a picture overlapping it. So let's add the picture first. Venice space img.jpg. Okay. So we just need to define a height for this entire stack. So that will be around 89 plus, we'll give it as 100 as the height. Okay, so now we have the picture here. I just need to crop the picture and reduce the size of it, right? So there's this widget called clip rect. The border radius here is, let's take it as around 16. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to change the width of the image. So to do that, we need to create basically a box sort of a layout, and we need to have like a specific width for that box and place the image inside it. So let's just define the width here. Let's see. There. Now we just need to add a card under the image. So to do that, um, inside the stack, we just need to add a card below with around the same slightly bigger width. Let's add a container first. the width as 220 and height as 100. You need to align the card to the bottom and the image to the top, right? So I'm going to add this widget called align. There. Now we have something similar. I can notice that the background color for this is a little different. So I'm just going to change it to that for scaffold. I guess we'll only be able to make something in the first screen today. I'm just going to take it for 10 more minutes, I guess, and then we'll stop today's. Right. So there we go. Something similar to what we're looking for. If I just increase the height a little bit, we'll be able to get more space here, like in the picture. Now inside this box, we need to be able to add some sort of text. So that will be inside this. I'm just going to increase the size of this card a little bit. Okay. In text, there's something called style, as you can see here. That's where you can change all the formatting in a text. So inside style, as you can see, I have specified the font size, the font weight, and similarly, I can also change the color. So for the text, specify colors.gray, and that's it. So that's how we're able to achieve something in our first widget here. Same way, I can add multiple, what do you say, these kind of cards inside one widget. In our list view, I've added a stack, right? I can just copy this entire stack and multiple, like 3 4 of them. If I do that, we will get something like this, something that we can scroll through. Now between the stack, I'm just going to add this so that that gap comes between each of them. So that's how you basically build a basic widget in Flutter with the rows and columns and padding. So I guess in the next session I'll be able to show you how this is also something very similar like how I did above. The same thing we can build below. Now in the next session, what I'm going to show is once I click on this picture for, say for example, Venice, it'll open up this new page with another couple of widgets. So basically in Flutter, every new page is another new big widget and you'll be able to redirect to it. So I guess since we're running out of time, we'll close the session for today.
I have a doubt. Hello.
Yeah, yeah,
Will this entire code will come directly convert into Java or Kotlin?
yeah. See, so by default, when you do Flutter create, it by default it makes a Kotlin based project, and but it's not like you can't write Java code. You can, if I open this Android folder, uh, you will see that there is a code for Kotlin. So you can add your Kotlin code also. Like there may be some functions which are native to Kotlin or Java. You can write that also. By default, it makes a Kotlin project. But if you want to make a Java project, there's a different format for it also. Flutter create. Uh, there was some parameter that Android type or something like that. If you specify, you can create a Kotlin, a Java-based project also.
So then I think in iOS, Swift code will be
Yeah,
automatically
yeah,
converted.
yeah. It will be based on there is either Objective C or Swift. So by default, it's Swift. But if you want, you can create an Objective C based project also.
If you don't have any other doubts, we can wrap this event up. Thank you so much.